All right. So one of the questions I get asked the most is, what did you do to quote unquote fire your boss, or basically leave my full-time job? And so rather than just me spouting out what I did to leave my job, I brought two of my friends on here to talk about how you can fire the man. So that's why I've got on David Schomer and Ken Wilson from the Firing the Man podcast. So gentlemen, thanks for coming on the Maximizing E-commerce podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. It's an honor to be on the show.
Yeah, I was honored to be on your show, and we talked about selling internationally, which is another one of the topics I get asked about. But I had left my job a while back, almost 2 years ago. It's hard to believe time flies when you're having fun. And since then, I've gotten to meet a lot of cool people like yourselves. And I know a lot of people, they're either in the camp of wanting to one day leave their job, or they're looking to leave their job and they're just left their job, or they're about ready to make the jump and they're just not really sure what to do. So excited to get into this and talk a little bit. So why don't we talk a little bit about you guys, is just real quick. How do you guys know each other?
Yeah, I can take that question. So I, about 2 years ago, started the St. Louis e-commerce club on meetup.com. And just a pro tip for your listeners.
Yeah.
That's super simple to do. And when you start your own networking event, people just are naturally attracted to talking to you, which kind of eliminates that like awkwardness at attending a networking fair. So I met Ken there and we instantly connected. We had mutual interests, both had e-commerce companies, and we found ourselves going out and grabbing a beer once a week and talking about e-commerce. Yeah. And we eventually decided, hey, why don't we, we can continue to drink our beer, but let's record this and provide some value. So we had a lot of people in that meetup that, were constantly asking us questions, and we thought that was the most efficient way to, get this information out to our tribe.
Nice. So you just kind of hit the record button so that people could benefit from the conversations you guys would have. So is there anything that is the most kind of controversial topic between the two of you? That whether it's something you talk about on air, or off air, or in the pre-beer conversations?
Would that be pre-beer or post-beer?
I'll let you decide either way.
I don't think there's any, not a whole lot controversial, I think after, doing a podcast with David for about a year, we talk off air a lot more than on air, right? But nothing controversial.
Nice. You guys have kind of developed a good working relationship there. So let's talk a little bit about the firing of the man. So have you both fired the man?
Sure. So I'll go first. I left my job in June, and so it's been, thanks. It's been going on 6 months now, and it's been pretty amazing. It was really nice, almost like breaking the chains. It's like now it's like, instead of having a fear of working, for someone else, now it's like, I'm never going back to that, right? So
right.
Like Kevin, it's like the fear swaps, right? You're like, okay.
It's like, oh.
Yeah. So a little bit about my journey. I started e-commerce. It's almost about 3 years now, and the intent was to build a business and grow it and be able to leave my job, right? So it took about almost 2.5 years, and probably about the last 6 months was kind of some deep planning. Okay, like here's the check boxes. Here's what I need to do. I got a family. I've got responsibilities here. Let's de-risk this. Let's make sure we hit all the check boxes. And then it was pretty sweet. David was there the day I left. Just packed it in and took off. So, and haven't looked back. Went straight forward.
Nice. And David, you're working on that goal, right?
Yeah. So in contrast to Ken, I am still working full time. So a little bit of my background. out of school, I was an accounting and finance major and got my CPA and CFA and went to work for a consulting firm, whom I'm still employed with. And when Ken and I were talking about podcast names, I remember a conversation that went something like, all right, if we're going to call this Firing the Man and we both have jobs, like, isn't that an issue? And what we decided was, no, let's document our journey. Let's talk about the steps that we're taking to fire the man. And, it's easy to look at somebody who's self-employed and has been for 5 years and, they fired the man, but we wanted to bring our audience along with us as we went through this and be very transparent about the struggles and about the successes. And so it was awesome to see Ken, 6 months after starting the podcast, he fired the man. The plan is in the works for me. I share, my journey on our podcast. But yes, I still am full-time employed and this is a side hustle.
Nice. Now, once both of you have fired the man, is it going to change the name of the show from Firing, kind of a present tense, to Fired the Man podcast?
I would say no. I'd like to bring our audience along with us, and for them to continuously be going through that process of firing the man. And it's interesting. We talk about, like, who is the man? Right. Everyone thinks it's like the corporate boss. It's the suit and tie when it's 90 degrees outside. But there are things as you're running your own independent business that are kind of like the man, working late into the night, working on weekends. That's one thing that I think a lot of people don't think about is, they want to quit their full-time job so they have more free time. And, I've heard this saying before, I'm self-employed, so I get to pick which 80 hours per week I work. And
right.
It's so, I think we're always going to be in the process of firing the man and just searching for freedom and kind of lifestyle design.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. There's so much to do after that. Ken, I think you were about to say something.
Yeah, no, I like fired the man, Kevin. But like David said, like if we can add value to someone else's life, like David and I, we have mentors. I was in a mastermind with you at one point. So if we can give back, like to anybody else that wants to fire the man, if they're going through that process of firing the man, it's kind of what it's all about.
Okay. Well, let's talk about this. So you had mentioned, Ken, that there were some check boxes that you checked off before pulling the trigger, so to speak. So can you kind of walk through what were those check boxes?
Sure. So, kind of the top three for me, like I said, I have family, I have children, responsibilities. Yeah. So I needed to replace my salary, obviously. Right. So then it's okay. So I need to grow my e-commerce business large enough to where I can extract a salary without damaging the business that could replace my other salary. So that was kind of step one. While doing that, it's like, okay, well, we all hear about, so I have an largely Amazon business. It was at the time anyway, right? So we think, okay, I've heard all these stories like, you wake up and you get that little red flag. Right?
Everyone worries about the red flag. Yes.
You're right. So halfway through this, I was probably 6 months into it. I heard that. I'm like, oh, that really happens. I'm like, oh, okay. So I started up a second brand. Okay. I need diversity here, right? Because I don't want that red flag to be the end of it. So started up another brand. I grew that one. And so the salary portion was pretty much taken care of. And next was insurance. And it's like, okay, to me, it's like, I think it goes a little bit deeper than just insurance, but I think the corporations, they kind of have you that with the insurance, right? It's
at least they make you think that.
You're right. So at the time, yeah. So now post, it's like, okay, that was an easy checkbox. That was probably one of the largest hurdles that I had. And until I actually pulled the trigger on it, it was not. So insurance, salary, insurance. And the other thing was, I wanted to have a sizable savings. So if anything happened, I had something to fall back onto. So I saved up 6 months of salary and put that aside. And then it was like, okay, there's nothing in my, that was kind of my main three. There was some other check boxes, but those were the main three. And yeah, and I would say there's probably a fourth was a mental, right? I think along the whole journey was a mental checkbox of like, can I really do this? Like, is this really possible? And once those other check boxes were done, it was like, yeah, let's do this and pull the trigger. So
okay,
kind of, yeah.
Well, let's walk through the insurance thing. So I have my feelings on it. And some of it is because, as some people maybe listening to this show know, I used to train and recruit insurance agents for a health insurance agency. And actually, if you go on my YouTube channel, one of my most popular videos is about this topic. Just because I was like, I should give back with some of this because I know that this is a hang up people have. So what did you find when you started looking into insurance?
Sure. You and I have talked offline about this a couple of times, right? So I did a lot of research on this. There's a lot of options. I don't have a list in front of me right now, but there's so what I chose was the open plan with healthcare.gov. So
okay,
so that's personally what I chose. There's private insurance you can go get. There's the open market you can go get. I mean, without getting into the weeds of everybody's lifestyle and everything. So for me, I rarely, I don't take any medications and I rarely go to the doctor. The only time I used to go to the doctor was to get paid by my company for going. So
right.
I don't need this. I don't need this Cadillac policy. Right. So, yeah, I mean, it was very easy to go onto the open market and purchase a plan. And like you said, there's lots of options. I found about 4 different ways to get insurance. And then I kind of weighed all of those and I picked the one that was kind of best for me.
Yeah. And that's one of the things is I think we're kind of conditioned from, and I don't mean to get into what is sometimes a contentious topic. So people outside of the US are like, what are you even talking about? Just go to the doctor, because that's what we do. But here in the States, it's pretty much, you got to get some sort of health insurance. And that anxiety is because for the longest time, insurance companies used to underwrite cases. And so you might not, they might not even give you insurance if you've had anything in your background that they didn't like necessarily. And so with the Affordable Care Act, AKA Obamacare, that all went away. So like the health insurance marketplace where you went to on healthcare.gov, which you have to live in the US. So if you're outside of the US, that's not going to apply to you, but it shows plans in your state and they're like actual like private companies. They're just basically in partnership with the US government to come up with that. And I actually picked a non-traditional route with like a health sharing ministry. And that's another option. So people don't realize there's so many options out there for health insurance. That is not the biggest thing, even though I think that really fits into more of what you said was that extra fourth box, which is the mindset. What was your mindset hurdle that was kind of preventing it?
I think just the unknown.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's widely known how to go get health insurance. Like maybe the corporations like, it's not out there. You need to work for us. Right. Like, so yeah, the unknown. And once I started researching it, talking to people, I really like you mentioned earlier and David mentioned, it's like having a podcast really expands your network. And so when you want to find something, go find someone that's been there and ask them how they did it. Right. So I went and I interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs that were full-time and said, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? So yeah, I think that mental hurdle of just understanding it, I'm a problem solver by nature. So once I saw that, then it's like, okay.
Yeah. And I will fully admit to everyone listening, the unknown, the fear of the unknown, it never really goes away. It's just something you kind of learn to adapt to. And so like for me, my products tend to do really well in the fourth quarter because they're very giftable. And so I go through this period of like almost depression, like about when Christmas starts, because all these like really big numbers on my phone start to go away. When I look at the app, it's nowhere near what it was, after that. And so like this past New Year's Eve, I was at a New Year's Eve party at a friend of ours house, and there was this couple over there who they were both pilots for like a pretty large airline. And I remember thinking like, oh, that would just be the life. You get to travel the world, you get these great, 6-figure salaries. Well, what's happened since then? Is that just safe of a job? It's not. So basically one of them's on furlough and the other one is hours cut back drastically. And I was talking to someone recently, a Fortune 500, former Fortune 500 company executive that I know, and he's gone the entrepreneurship route, even though he had a pretty safe job. Well, at the time seemed very safe job. But think of all that's happened lately. And so there's just something that's powerful about waking up and not having to wait for someone else to tell you you can come back to work, which I think a lot of people are still going through that right now.
Yeah, I'd say that, the life of an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
It's peaks and valleys. And, one of the other things is, with being an entrepreneur, it's like you don't wake up having someone else tell you what time to go to work, right?
Right. You have to be the one to do it.
Right.
So it's all about kind of creating rituals and stuff like that. So David, let's talk a little bit about your journey. So all three of us can relate to what you are going through. And I think everyone, unless they graduated from high school and went into self-employment right away, which most people have not done, even if they're full-time entrepreneurs now, can relate to your path. And so I'm sure a lot of people's ears are going to perk of like, you're a few steps ahead of where they'd like to be on that road to one day full-time entrepreneurship. So what's your path to check your boxes off?
I would say a very similar path to Ken. I would say one different thing is I generally am a pretty risk averse person. And you look at the lifestyle of an entrepreneur and it's not always risk averse. And so, and that was actually one thing that attracted me to the accounting profession was it seemed like the safest job in the world.
Right.
And so one thing that I've been doing, and this isn't a traditional path, but I have been taking some of the money out of my company and buying investment properties. Real estate is very steady. And so in the last 2 years, I've bought 11 properties and I love e-commerce. Wow. I really do. Real estate is boring, but it's steady. You're never going to double your money in 1 year. But if you can make $200 or $300 per front door per month, you're going to do well. And so I have tried to balance out that risk equation by pulling money out of e-commerce and putting it into real estate. Now, that's a whole nother conversation, but I would say that's something that I really like safety. I don't like to worry about money. I've had periods of time in my life where I have worried about money and I hate that anxious feeling. And so, I would say for the last 6 months, I've been at a point where I could jump off, but haven't quite been where I need to be. And so one thing that I'm doing, and Ken mentioned this, is trying to replace my salary by a factor of 3. And so, say one of your listeners is making $60,000 a year. I think a really safe time to exit would be when you have net income of 180,000. Probably a 2x is fine. And the reason I say that is, say you hit net income of $60,000 and you're making $60,000 at your day job. Well, if you leave, you're going to have $60,000 less from what you were making, right? At some point, you're double dipping. And if you draw all of that income out of your business, you don't have anything to inject into the business for growth. And so that's one thing that, obviously when you surpass your salary, that's a good thing, but I would say you don't stop there. My recommendation would be at least 2x. I'm trying to get to 3x. Just because I am a pansy when it comes to risk. And I know that. And so I'm trying to put some safeguards in place to adjust for that.
Well, the thing I'll say about that is I respect the fact that we all have our risk tolerances. And, it's different for different people. Now, clearly you're doing pretty well if you've got 11 properties and e-commerce is helping to fuel that. So I could see too, like, you know, if you enjoy what you're doing with debits and credits, you know, you might as well stay with it. And why you don't have to be on a quest to leave the job. I mean, because as much as, you know, we all love the idea of firing the man, can be on your own terms. And that's the whole thing with it. Like, so what's interesting in your case is, you know, you're continuing down that path and your goal is 3x. Now, let me just ask this question. If they tapped you on the shoulder tomorrow and said, hey, you're great, we love having you around, but we're going to have to offer you the severance package. Your position is eliminated. What would be your next step? Would you go look for another job?
No, I would go into e-commerce full time,
Okay.
And that would be probably the kick in the butt that I need. And so, you know, one other thing that I think is relevant to talk about here is, you know, we talk about firing the man as being like an all or nothing thing, and that's not necessarily the case. You know, if you're working full time, you could work part time, right? If you're working a job that requires 60 hours per week, maybe find something in sales that pays a little less, that's commission based, to where you can work 30 or 40 hours per week. I mean, one thing that I'll tell you is it's a lot of work when you're working full time and trying to grow and scale an e-commerce business. And there's a huge difference between a 40-hour week and a 60-hour week. And there are some jobs out there that require 60 hours. There's some that require 40 or 30. And so it is, I don't want people to think of it as an all or nothing thing. And, you know, the last thing I'll say here is that if you leave, and this kind of goes back to my comments about risk aversion, is that if you leave, and assuming that you leave on good terms and, you know, don't give Deborah the middle finger on your way out. You know, if you leave on good terms, typically you're going to have, at the very least, good recommendations from your previous employer. Best case scenario is an open opportunity to come back. And so the man's not going anywhere. And so if you go into e-commerce and say you left too early, or say things don't pan out the way you wanted, you can go back. And that's something that I think a lot of people think, you know, they don't think of when they're going through this process of how do I fire the man and playing the what if game.
Right. Yeah, there are so many what ifs that we kind of run into. And, you know, some of it is, you know, in our own heads, but then some of it is, you know, kind of a creation of our environment. And I like what you said there about, you know, you can go somewhat part-time, or just you can have a different mental experience with your boss. You know, for example, I think there's power in knowing you plan to leave, and correct me if I'm wrong, since you're in the middle of it right now, David, that you're not saying my future career growth is tied into what my boss thinks of me. It's more tied into what I think of where I'm going. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one last thing I wanted to mention is when people think about compensation, they're oftentimes thinking about the dollars that flow into your bank account. And that is true. However, knowledge and skills, I would say, is just as important. So, you know, one thing I like about my current job is I work in mergers and acquisitions. I'm seeing all kinds of different businesses, what goes well, what doesn't, and I'm learning. And so that's been valuable, and those are transferable skills. Now, if you're working in a job and it has nothing to do with e-commerce, maybe you fire the man and go work for an ad agency, or you know, a company that does SEO or PPC, and develop that skill. So while you're getting paid, you're also developing a skill set that's going to help you thrive in your own business.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And one of the interesting thing is I went from, in my last job, from training and recruiting insurance agents and kind of running a call center, to basically doing more kind of like social media work. It was almost like, do they know kind of in the back of their head what I'm trying to do? So it was almost kind of like a blessing in disguise. So Ken, let's talk a little bit real quick. what was it like the day you put in your notice? Can you kind of describe what was it like when you were driving into work knowing you were going to put in your notice?
Sure. So I was working. I've been working remote for like 2 years,
Yeah.
so there was no driving.
Oh, okay. Got it.
But yeah. So
it was the walk to the computer.
it was right. It was logging in.
Yeah.
So at the time, I was leading a team of 10 engineers. I had just taken on a new role, and my current manager, I had this plan in motion. My current manager, who brought me on to this new team, he left like 30 days before I had planned to leave. So I had a new director, and they were offering actually a severance buyout, right?
Oh, okay.
And I thought, oh, this is kind of like the perfect little parting gift, right?
Yeah.
So I had to actually kind of word ninja my escape plan, right? Because I was leading this team, and I thought, well, if are they gonna let me go? If they just brought me in, he's managing. So anyway, it was, I was tiptoeing a little bit, but essentially I said, hey, I have this opportunity that I'm very passionate about, and I would really love to go pursue this, and I would love for you to allow me to do that. And he was really, really supportive, and was like, I totally get it. Can you give me an extra 30 days? And I said, yeah, I'll do that. So we worked it out, and yeah, so it went pretty smooth. It was kind of like on eggshells for a little bit. Is it all going to work out? But yeah, nervous. I was like, I would say doubly nervous, not only to leave, but to also, was I going to be able to leave on really good terms or not? So yeah, it was interesting.
Yes. So that is interesting. So it's one of those crazy things that you sometimes get these blessings in disguise, and that's awesome that you were presented with the severance package. I remember when I was still in the Fortune 500 world, I was basically tapped on the shoulder of like, basically your position's eliminated. It was less of you at least kind of had more choice there. Mine, it was, my position was eliminated, and it was basically apply for another job in the company or take a severance package. And I think they genuinely thought I was going to apply for something else in the company, and they'd find a home for me. And I was like, this is a chance to do something different, because I had just kind of gotten into the whole idea of entrepreneurial podcasts and things like that. And so that's how I ended up working for a friend of mine at their insurance agency, which was going through kind of rocket ship growth at the time. So I love your story of, it was basically the opportunity presented itself and you took it, because I got to give you a lot of kudos for that, because a lot of times people will have an opportunity like that in front of them and they don't take it for whatever reason, which is usually more of the boxes you were talking about. They may tell themselves it's all those other three boxes, but it's really the fourth one, the mental game. So to kind of help people a little bit more between the two of you, and either of you can jump in, help me understand, like, what advice would you give to someone if they came to you and said, all right, I'm midway through my journey of quitting my job, if they know where they are in the journey, because I don't think it's quite so simple. But if they say to you like, hey, my goal is to leave my job in the next year, what would you tell them?
I can take this one, and Ken, I'm interested in your thoughts. As I watched Ken go through his process, one thing that I thought was really neat that he did was that he had a plan, and it wasn't just a plan up in his head, but it was documented and it was laid out. And he had a quit day on his calendar, and that was something that he was working towards. And so that's something, like, there's a huge difference between having a plan in your head and having a plan on paper. And not just a plan, but action steps that you're going to take to get there. We talked about insurance earlier. Find an insurance carrier is your goal, right? But then there's an action plan where it's, contact 5 insurance brokers, ask two people that are self-employed what they do for insurance.
Mm.
And, you know, at the end of that, you've got your result. And that was one thing I really admired about Ken's process. And as I, you know, make my plan, that's something that I'll be following.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, to kind of add on to that, everything David said, I would say the same, and I would also take it one step further, and I would say, you know, what was really helpful for me was having a business coach, a mentor,
Mm.
working one on one with, and that was crucial for me. It helped me push through those mental barriers that I had. So I would say if you're, you know, 50% of the way through the process, I would say find someone that's done it and get them on your side, right? Talk to them, work up a relationship, whatever you got to do, pick their brain. And, you know, most of all for me, it was like a lot of it was mental. And, you know, I always think of this saying, we've talked about it before, burn the boats, right? Like to me, it was like, this is now or never for me. Like
Yeah.
I have to, there's no going back, right? Even though there is a plan to go back, if you have to, you have to give your brain, you can't give your brain any escapes. You said, burn the boats, I'm going forward. And that really gave me a mental surge on like, just there's nothing that's going to stop me. So
I love the burn the boats analogy. I love it. That's great. I love it because it really is a combination of both the things you both mentioned. It's a combination of having a plan in place, but at a certain point saying, you know, like the famous story of the Spanish conquistador, if that's the right word, Cortez, you know, when it was, we're going to win here and just going to have to burn the boats. And the only way out of here is to win. So, that's kind of what it truly is in entrepreneurship. You got to put yourself in the situation where you have no other choice but to win at some point. And so, I think everyone listening to this, if they've got a product for sale, has kind of gotten to that point to some degree that, you know, you kind of burn the boats with at least the money you spent, that, you know, you got to make it work. Otherwise you're not going to be able to keep up this. So love it, love it, love it. So if anybody wanted to find your podcast or follow you more, where would they go?
firingtheman.com. We're syndicated on, I think, 14 different podcast channels, iTunes, pretty much everywhere. But yeah, firingtheman.com.
Yeah, definitely.
And Firing the Man on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Oh, nice. So you lined up all your social channels. I like that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Good, good, good. So definitely recommend folks head on over to firingtheman.com or subscribe on iTunes or wherever it is they like listening to podcasts. So this was a fun conversation. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, Kevin.
Yep. Thanks, Kevin.